A beautiful spring day. Or is it a tableau? Is it art? What exactly is art? Who decides what it is? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Can I create art? How long would that take? I got in touch with a few people who might be able to help me answer that question.
Probably spent on one song upwards of, I can't give an exact number, but definitely upwards of 24 hours.
Well, I know one was months where I had the first 3 lines. It just came to me, and then nothing else happened. And maybe 6 months later, suddenly the whole rest of the poem just appeared.
I would say that I spent like probably 8 hours total.
I made a prom dress that took me about 2 months to complete.
So to make great art, all I have to do is invest a lot of time?
Not necessarily. I think, I don't think more time on a song necessarily yields better results.
It was Randall Jarrell, poet and critic from the 1950s, who said that a poet is someone who sits down at a desk and hopes to be struck by lightning. You can't, and now I'm quoting Charles Simic, you cannot will a memorable phrase into being. It sounds forced, because it was.
Well, if you want to make something quickly, you cut lots of corners, you probably won't measure or cut things as accurately, maybe your stitching will be sloppy, things can fall apart.
So then who exactly decides when something can be called art?
Well, it's an interesting question because with the example of Marcel Duchamp and the toilet that he entered into the Armory show in 1913 as his art, in that one instant it took the people who decided what art was became the artists and not the critics.
It's all subjective. I may make clothes that are an expression of who I am or how I feel, or something that I want to let other people see or experience, but other people may not feel that way or may not look that deep into it.
That I think, yes, I think absolutely what is art is in the hands of the artist 100%.
I think at the end of the day, really, it's up to the person who's making it to classify it as such. And if people choose to respond to it in the same way, then that's good. And if not, then that's good too.
So let me get this straight. All I have to do to make art is be an artist?
It would be unfair to speak for all artists today, but I think that probably a large majority of them are just kind of groping for some sense of identity at all, whatever it takes to do that.
100 years ago, everyone wrote pretty much the same way. Until there was T.S. Eliot and until there was Ezra Pound and some others, it was a pretty monolithic culture. Now there is every kind of poetry, and it's all over the place. And I don't enjoy it all. I don't read the language poets. I don't really read the spoken word poets. And again, they're more spoken word than read. There are poets who call themselves edgy and dangerous, and I find that a little presumptive, but I'm for whatever they're doing because it's advancing poetry. Even if I don't get some of it or I don't enjoy it, they're not doing anyone any harm.
50, 60 years ago, men wore suits, men wore hats, women wore dresses that weren't super revealing, full skirts, things like that. And nowadays, everybody has different styles. You have like urban streetwear, and you have high fashion Victorian inspired couture. There's just so many different facets of it than there were 50 years ago.
There are trends that I like and trends that I don't like. There are people who are kind of returning to some older ideas now that we feel that we've maybe exhausted a lot of options that we had begun to explore.
Originality total and complete originality is sort of impossible. But there's always room to make something new or to make something sort of uniquely your own.
I think, at least in terms of clothing, everything is just an interpretation of something before it or is inspired by something else, and that people nowadays never truly make anything that is completely original.
Everybody wants to be able to say, like, this is my style, like, this is my look of my art, and so people will be able to identify and say, oh, that's Tommy Gruen's art. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that it's pretty difficult to do something completely original. I mean, at the same time, that's all that can be done, but it's easy to say, to look at something that has been created and compare it right away to something that was done any number of years ago, or, you know, hundreds, perhaps.
Even in the art world, you still have curators, and you have critics.
You know, people pick up a magazine, and whatever the people in the magazine are saying is what's in this season is what people are going to buy. You know, the tastemakers, the people who are going to Fashion Week, the people who are seeing new things that people are designing, the people who are saying, well, I like this, I don't like this.
I think you sort of have to take it upon yourself to decide when you think you're finished. You know, and sometimes, as with a lot of art, I think you kind of get to a point where you're sort of just done with it. You're kind of over it. And I think, you know, that either then turns into dropping the project as a whole, or I think sort of accepting where it is now, because as with anything, I think there's always room for change. Maybe not improvement, but always room for change, or changing something that you've done. And I think you get to a point where you accept it as a finished piece, and if you're content with it and you're happy with it, then you can put it out.
But, I mean, like, if you take somebody like Jackson Pollock, who it's kind of cliche to say that, oh, I hate his work, but I really do hate his work. There's definitely some indication of whether or not the work is complete, because he covered the whole canvas. So once the whole thing's covered in paint, then he can say he's done with it.
Artists are themselves individuals and different from one another. And personal questions enter into the equation. T.S. Eliot was writing, I think, in a grander style and for a grander audience. It was loftier what T.S. Eliot was after than, say, a haiku artist of 17th century Japan. But, you know, at root they both share that impulse to speak and to put words on paper wherever they lead. And so in that sense, you know, architects have always designed buildings. Sculptors have always worked with clay, and writers have always put words on paper. So it's going to be different, and it's also going to be the same, I'm guessing.
To me, art is any sort of physical manifestation of what people can imagine, or what people want to see or feel, or want other people to, you know, experience, and we put it into a form that you can wear on your body and use as a walking canvas. To me, that's what fashion is about. It's about portraying your mood or who you are as a person on your own body out there for everyone else to see. And some people, clothing is utilitarian. It's to protect you from the elements, but to me, fashion as an art is the exaggeration of what used to be a human necessity, and now we have the luxury of turning it into something that is just completely beyond that.
I think, and I kind of think the same as with art, I think if you have a propensity or an inclination to create music, I think you should do it regardless of A, what it is, or B, people, or how people respond to it. I think there's a creative energy within people that I think, if is recognized, should be satisfied. And so I think regardless of what it is you choose to create, I think that you should do it. I think it's healthy.
I would say that even considering the innumerable myriad of things that we are doing with art today, and wherever we're going with that, it turns out a lot of stuff that will kind of garner opinions from every extreme. but I think it's a necessary and natural process, and I'm glad it's ongoing.
I think we can conclude that art isn't something which can be well defined. It is defined both by individuals and by a collective. It resists the rigidity of definition because it is fluid, it is ubiquitous. It begins with a single throb of insight, inspiration, a mere idea which sprawls into reality onto the cloth or canvas or page or into sound waves. Art doesn't merely hang on the walls of a museum, it lives within all of us. We might not know what the definition of art is, but that's not going to stop us from creating it. I don't think it ever will.